The Motor Dream podcast is recorded on Wallamedigal land of the Eora Nation. It always was and always will be the lands of the First Nations of Australia.
This is the Motor Dream podcast.
Hello once again and welcome to the Motor Dream podcast, a show where we can dream just a little about what our dream garage would be if money was no issue whatsoever. I'm Conor McNally and I'm so glad you can join me for this, the 18th episode of the first series. It's been quite a journey so far, this Dream Garage Odyssey. In the previous 16 episodes, I've had a wide variety of vehicles from different ends of the spectrum, from exotic Ferraris and Lamborghinis to German thoroughbreds such as Porsches and BMWs, all the way down to your everyday runabouts like your Nissan X-Trails and Toyota Corollas, to your classic machinery such as a Ford Falcon station wagon. And if you listen to the last episode commemorating the life of Ayrton Senna only recently, we added two of his cars from his Formula One career that typified the impact that he made on the sport. So if you've been along for the ride so far, thank you so much for being a part of it. If you're new, welcome along and make sure you catch up on all previous episodes by liking and subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts. For all you newbies who've discovered this podcast, here's how it works. I tell my guests that one day they wake up and they check their phones and they discover that they receive a text to say that they need to check their bank balance. They then open up their bank app and they suddenly discover that their balance has gone to infinity. They are instant billionaires. As soon as they discover their newfound fortune, they get an email from this mystery benefactor that they have no idea who it's from, and it tells them that they can spend anything that they like and buy any car, bike or machine that they want. There is a catch though. They are only allowed to have 3 cars, bikes or machines in their dream garage. It sounds easy, doesn't it? Trust me, it is not. It is very, very difficult, as my previous guests have recently discovered. You'll get to hear from drivers and riders from within the motorsport game, as well as those who work in the motoring industry, and on the odd occasion you'll hear from some prominent personalities who all share the same passion for cars as well as motoring. And speaking of prominent personalities, my guest on this episode is kind of a big deal if you're a fan of either Mighty Car Mods or Top Gear. Perhaps you're a fan of both. So I'm going to cut to the chase. I took a little bit of inspiration from my fellow industry colleague Greg Rust, who recently had Australian actor and host of Australian Survivor, Jonathan LaPaglia, on his Rusty's Garage shortcast, The Motorsport Brief, in the lead up to the premiere of Top Gear Australia on Paramount+. Now, the Australian adaptation of the iconic BBC motoring show had an initial run of 4 years between 2008 to 2012 on SBS and Channel 9. Despite a lot of promise, it just didn't quite live up to the expectations of the Australian public. So it came to the surprise of many when it was announced that the series would be revived for 2024. Only this time, the series would be a full-scale production from the BBC itself, delivering the high-quality product you've seen previously on the original British version, first made famous by Jeremy Clarkson, Richard Hammond and James May. In the 2024 version of Top Gear Australia, LaPaglia will be joined by former rugby league star turned TV personality and all-round funny guy Beau Ryan. And they'll be joined by a true motoring enthusiast who co-hosts a YouTube channel that has nearly 4 million subscribers and counting. Affectionately called Moog by his legion of fans on Mighty Car Mods, Blair Joscelyne created the series with his mate Marty Mulholland, and the pair started the channel in 2008 as a way to show how two amateurs can do DIY work on their cars on the cheap. They must have done something right, because from that very first video, it has spawned into a massive community that has brought car enthusiasts together. It also made the pair bona fide motoring personalities in the mainstream. So when Moog was approached by the BBC to be a part of Top Gear Australia, it was something that he couldn't say no to. With that, I suddenly had a light bulb moment. When I contacted Network 10 to see if I could interview either Beau or Moog, they replied promptly to say Moog was keen to come on and chat all things cars with me. And what better timing to chat with him, because the first couple of episodes of Top Gear Australia will be dropping tonight, Friday, May the 17th, on Paramount+. So without further ado, it's a great pleasure to welcome the Moog man himself, Blair Joscelyne, to the Motor Dream podcast. one half of Mighty Car Mods and 1/3 of the recently re-established Top Gear Australia, Blair Joscelyne, aka Moog. Welcome to the Motor Dream podcast. It is absolutely awesome to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, and thanks for making a show about cars, because that's what it's all about.
It
it's
is.
about the vehicle having me on.
Oh, absolutely. And look, Mighty Car Mods, what a show. Like, you started this about 15, 16 years ago as a YouTube channel that's grown into a massive community, and your fan base is just wide and varied. I mean, you touch on a lot of cars. I mean, I look at Instagram, almost 700,000 followers. You've done 3,000 posts, and you've covered a lot of JDM stuff, a lot of Japanese cars, and you do some weird and wonderful things. It's a crazy concept, but it's something that you and Marty do so well, and it works. It just works because it speaks to everyone that loves about cars. You know, everyone likes to get down and dirty and try and do their own creation of their own car, and you know, it's the trials and tribulations of it, and it's great fun just watching you two, you know, talk about cars, working on cars, and creating some really crazy stuff, but sometimes some very inspiring stuff as well.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I think we end up kind of penduluming between a few different things, because we do really like cheap cars and making them fast because we think they're accessible, and it's one of the things that I had to speak to the producers about when I was first chatting with BBC Studios about doing Top Gear. And I said, you know, I don't really exalt supercars the way that most people do. I'm not really that interested. Like, if there was 10 supercars at a meet and someone had an MX-5 with coilovers and they'd turbocharge it, that's the car that I would be looking at.
Yeah.
And so I said, you know, as long as you don't need me to say stuff that I wouldn't normally say, that's fine. And they were like, of course not. We're not going to say you have to say this or script that you've got to say a thing that you don't believe. Just come and experience it and try it. And so I did. And so it was pretty amazing for me, kind of being in places like Europe and driving around in supercars, because I would never normally do that. But I was very, you know, excited when I finished Top Gear to then jump back onto Marketplace and buy some shit boxes again.
I love your thinking. But what a great opportunity for you to work alongside Beau and Jonathan LaPaglia. So a bit of Hollywood royalty and rugby league royalty. Let's face it, Beau is a former rugby league superstar in his own right. But apparently, but he's a very funny man in his own right as well. But Top Gear Australia, it's been brought back after more than a decade off air, and it's a great opportunity to, I guess, showcase what motoring is all about. The Top Gear franchise in the UK at the moment is currently on hiatus. It's great that Top Gear Australia is coming back. And what's so good about this series that we're about to see on Paramount Plus? What's going to make it so different to what it was the first time around?
Well, the first thing what I want to be clear about is this is not a kind of a third season of what was Top Gear Australia. It's a completely new production that is separate. So other than kind of being a Top Gear Australia show, it doesn't have lineage going back to the previous versions that have happened in Australia. This one is made by BBC Studios and made with a lot of the same crew that have been making the show for the last 20 years. So while there are Australian crew, it was supplemented with the people that have been working on the show for a very long time during the Clarkson era as well. So we're talking camera people, sound people, executive producers, writers. I mean, these are the people that have been working on the show for all this time. And I think in many ways kind of define what the spirit of the show is.
Yeah.
So it was really amazing working with them, but they went big. You know, I think they didn't try and say, well, you guys are Australian, and so what's the stereotypical thing of Australian cars meant to be like? Let's do a Holden versus Ford battle or something. They didn't do that. They kind of went, let's just go big. And so there are supercars in Italy, there's Swiss Alps, there's Formula One tracks, there's Colombia, there's drag racing in Texas, and there are some stories that are in Australia, but the majority of the stories are international, big budget stories, and big premise, you know. And so I'm very excited to be part of it. Kind of shocked, actually. I'm like, I don't know why that shows me, but here I am.
Well, I was going to ask you about that because you've obviously built this massive audience with you and Marty. Mighty Car Mods is a great show in its own right online and has a massive community. But were you shocked when the BBC came to you and said, we want you to be a part of the recreation of Top Gear Australia?
Yeah, I was surprised because I didn't know if it's something that I could do. And I mean, I second guessed my ability and whether I would actually be able to do what it is that they wanted, because I've never made TV before.
Right.
And it was actually Marty who really pushed me. And that's kind of I think a defining part of a friendship is when somebody can really push you to be a better version of yourself, I guess. And he said, why don't you audition for it? I spoke to my family about it, spoke to him about it, and I thought I'll just audition. It was an audition process, and a lot of different people came from Australia and overseas, and it was a couple of days at Sydney Motorsport Park that involved driving. There was skid pan, there was time lapse, there was performance driving, there was ad-libbing, there was car knowledge, and then they would try lots of different variations of people together. And in the end, there was male, there was female, there was all sorts of people with different motoring backgrounds, and the three of us ended up being offered the job. And I just thought, you know what, if they think I can do it, I'll just fake it until further notice. And I've managed to fake it a whole series and had a great time doing so.
I'm looking forward to watching it, and Paramount Plus will be the place to be to watch all episodes. I think that the first episode drops on Friday, and that's exciting in itself.
Well, depending on when this airs, they're actually doing a double drop. So there will be series out. So there'll be supercars in Italy, and then similar to the kind of the UK Top Gear, we did a special as well. So one that doesn't have all the interviews and the stars in the cars. We did a version that is just a road trip across the country. So it's a full feature special, which is us trying to survive our way across Colombia, and that will drop on the same night.
Was it rather nerve-wracking to actually go across Colombia with two other people that probably have never been to Colombia before?
Well, Beau had actually spent some time there doing one of his series, The Amazing Race.
Of course.
But obviously, when you Google Colombia, you read about kind of kidnappings and drugs and things like that. But in the same way, when people Google Australia, they read about killer kangaroos and turtles and stuff that are going to bite you and kill you. So that stuff is not entirely accurate. But the scariest part about going across Colombia was being stuck with Beau Ryan for a week. And after a little while, you're like, man, I actually wouldn't mind a little kidnapping just to get a bit of a break. Of course, joking aside, but no, it was very well organized. There was lots of security. Yeah. We had armed security with us. There was a police escort as well. And that was one of the amazing opportunities of working on Top Gear that I wouldn't have been able to do that experience otherwise. I don't think you could just go into Colombia, buy some cars and drive along willy-nilly. You kind of need to organise that with safety in mind as well.
Oh, of course. What's it like working with Beau Ryan and Jonathan LaPaglia?
We got along really well. We also annoyed the shit out of each other. We are as different as you could get. You've got Beau, who's, ex-NRL, super competitive, just life of the party, shit-talking constantly. Then you've got the other end of the spectrum, which is Jonathan, who's quite, a serious actor, but very professional, making sure everything's going according to plan. And then you've just got Mr. Wildcard, which is me, just kind of cutting loose, drifting cars around, answering the important questions like, can you drift a caravan? These things. And so I had to answer those questions, and I did.
That is crazy. That is just crazy. Although I had to look up a little bit, do Beau and Jonathan have car credentials? Obviously, Jonathan does have a Dodge Daytona back in the United States, so he has a little bit of car cred.
He built his car himself. He built his car. His dad's a mechanic, so he knows about cars. And in fact, he spent time on the side of the road in Colombia fixing his car himself. That worked. Beau, he likes to drive fast stuff. He wants to buy it. He wants to get in it. He wants to drive it. He wants to be bigger and faster than everybody else. But I think that dynamic is, if you have three people who are experts, I'm not saying that I'm an expert because I'm not, but if you did hypothetically have three people that are experts about cars, I don't know if that's very fertile ground for interesting conversation because everybody's seeing everyone's point. And so sometimes I'm talking about, how a carby works, and Jonathan and I are involved in that. And Beau's just like, who gives a shit? Let's go. And I think there's something fun in that.
Well, you do know how to talk. You're an expert of building up shit boxes and turning them into gold, which is something that you do quite well.
I'm not an expert. I've spent a lot of shitty cars.
Well, you do a good job of it. And I had to watch a couple of videos before the interview that we're conducting now. And you and Marty put together some really cool shit boxes into cars that you actually sold and made a profit of. You actually recently turned a $2,500 Toyota Corolla that you bought off Facebook Marketplace and made a profit of it in, 24 hours or something. Tell us a bit about that.
That's 3 hours.
3 hours, so yes.
Double our money in that small amount of time. I think a lot of the time what we're doing is we're working on pretty ambitious projects considering we're not mechanics ourselves. And so some of the projects that we're working on have been multi-year builds that the YouTube audience hasn't seen yet. And they've literally been going for years. And so what we're trying to do is, while we're working on these cars, when we release them, we don't want to be one of these channels that is doing a build and, here's a whole video on why I chose this wheel, or a whole video on if I'll buy a new seat or not. We want the videos to be meaty. And so sometimes while we're doing these really big projects or there's cars being painted, we'll do these quick builds in between just to kind of normalize working on cars, I guess, and just kind of say, if you were just a normal guy with some basic tools and you want to have a fiddle around with your car, then what is possible? And that's what we've been doing with this kind of flip series of just showing people basic ways to fix their cars. And I think in many ways that harks back to the original seasons of Mighty Car Mods, which would be, how to use black paint to make your car look better, or how to wash your car, or how to clean your seats. And that used to be a whole video back in the day. Now in one of our videos, we'll buy a car, engine swap it, change the interior, rewire it, put a Haltech ECU, tune it, and then go and race someone. The scope of it has just got a lot bigger, and sometimes that takes more time than the audience has patience for.
I like what you pointed out in one of the videos, is that everyone is these days very disposable about things, and it's not just disposable income, but disposable of the material things that we take for granted so much now. Whereas we look at cars and if they feel like they're disposable, and if something goes wrong, we just buy another car and get rid of it. You're trying to teach people that it doesn't have to be that way. If we have a lot of time to, learn about the mechanical side of things and just do the basic things like changing oils and changing the basic mechanics, like changing a brake pad or doing the basic maintenance, the car can survive for a long time without needing to dispose of it and get another car. That's what you're trying to teach people.
On one level I am, but for me it actually goes a little bit deeper than that. And what I'm trying to kind of demonstrate and what I'm trying to exhibit myself in my own life is a bit more resilience when things aren't going right. And I think what can happen with a car, it can become a nice analogy for working stuff out. If it doesn't work, and because I'm not a mechanic, I got to call people in to help. And Marty knows 100 times more than I do. And then if he can't work out, there's someone we can call in and get some help. And I think it's not just about cars, it's about learn to cook your own food. Learn to fix your shoes, learn to do your own gardening. A lot of things that we kind of pay other people to do. I think there's a huge amount of value in learning how to fix things yourself, even if it is fixing something as simple as a table, finding a chair on the side of the road. Because one of the things that you'll never understand until you do it yourself is what it feels like to fix something and the pride you have fixing it. And for me, it just turns out that cars is what I want to fix. But I would hope that that kind of sentiment also flows beyond that and becomes something that you can exhibit in your life,
That's a great
little philosophical bent.
That's a really great analogy. I really like that. I want to know a little bit more about your upbringing. Like, how did you get into cars? What was the first time in your life that you went, cars are for me? When did that spark first happen for you?
It's such a good question. And I remember I grew up in country New South Wales, and my dad worked at a local radio station, and he got in maybe 1984 or so a Ford Falcon LTD. Do you know about those?
I do know the LTDs. I'm 44, so I'm a 1980s child. I know what they are.
Oh, you and I are the same age.
Yes.
I'm 45.
Yeah, I'm 44. I'll be 44 in July. So yeah.
Okay, we're the same age. So Ford, you look very young. Keep moisturising.
Thank you.
Ford Falcon, and I remember getting taken to school, and I was sitting in the back, and I went to put the window down, and there was no window winder. I'm like, what is this sorcery? And my dad says, there's a button. My mind is blown. There's no way a button can open a window. And I pressed it. And as you can imagine, I spent the rest of the trip putting the window up and down. That was the first time, strangely, I got really, really excited about cars. I was just like, this is amazing. I was the youngest of 4 kids, and all of my siblings, they got given bikes to ride around on.
Yeah.
I didn't, because I'd normally get hand-me-downs, but I was actually given a goat, and I learned to drive by riding a goat, which is a true story. So I would ride around the paddocks at home, learning about gravity and dynamic control, and leaning into corners. I learned all that from a goat.
That's crazy. To learn riding on a goat. I mean, that, like, it doesn't compute, but I can see the logic in some respects. But that obviously transgressed into cars. Like, when did when did it really take a hold of you? Was it from that moment that you drove? Well, you had to ride in that LTD.
It was riding in the LTD, and then later on, my mum had been really into minis. And when I was 14 or 15, I saved up and bought a mini.
Oh, nice.
Obviously not old enough to have my license yet, but I got in that car. And we had a circular driveway at home, and I would just drive round and round and round. And I could not believe that if you owned a car and you had a license, you were allowed to just drive anywhere you want in Australia. You can just get in a car and go. And that idea of freedom and the idea of just being able to hit the open road and go is something that I still adore to this day. And so from that point, I saw cars less as a collection of individual parts, but more as a way of giving you an adventure.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the time on Mighty Car Mods, we're showing people how to fix components, but the other half of the videos we're doing are about road trips, across Japan or in New Zealand, and really using that car as to give you purpose to go and do something and have an adventure. And so I would say, probably goats aside, from when I was 14 or 15, that's when I was like, this is the best, because a car is like a modern day horse, a modern day goat even, and it can take you anywhere you want to go.
Absolutely. Yeah. For me, I got into cars because I loved motorsport, and I still love motorsport to this very day. I still have a passion watching like supercars or touring car racing as it was, or even endurance racing, be it Bathurst 1000 or the 12-hour, or even European race like Le Mans, of course. So they're the kind of races that I really got into. And I guess
it's so interesting that you say that, because sorry to cut you off, but it's I never got into it. I never did when I was young.
Yeah.
And I got into racing in probably the last 4 or 5 years. And, I went to the 24-hour Le Mans and been to Bathurst multiple times. And Marty and I did an endurance race at Sepang Circuit in Malaysia last year. And so now I totally get it. But you and I kind of came at it from very different sides, because I was exposed to motorsport through my time working and creating Mighty Car Mods and then Top Gear. But that was never something that kind of spiked my interest in the beginning.
Yeah, because I was going to say, you got more into the JDM car culture. Like, that was something that, that's been, I guess, bread and butter of what Mighty Car Mods has been all about. But the JDM car culture, that really spiked your interest in the whole scene in that sense. When did you really fall in love with the JDM side of things?
Well, it was because it was cheap. Because really right now, kind of JDM cars see a certain kind of tax, because they're seen as these kind of prestige, iconic JDM hero cars. But that's not the way certainly it used to be. And in the early 2000s, if you wanted to get a car, it was cheaper to import one from Japan. So while I kind of liked the Japanese aesthetic of cars and the performance, it really was an affordability issue, because you could look around and go, maybe similar examples of cars with performance is, how much, you probably know this more than me, how much do you reckon like an SS Commodore Ute would have cost in like the early 2000s?
Oh, geez, it would have been about 40 grand back in the day.
40 grand?
Yeah.
So you could buy a Nissan Silvia K Turbo or a 180SX with an SR20 for 4 million yen from Japan, which is about $4,000 imported, at 6 grand. So I reckon about $6,000 Australian. And their performance was very similar. We're probably talking quarter mile times of 14 seconds, you reckon?
About that. Yeah.
And so for a saving of almost $35,000, you can go just as quick. So to me, it was like, oh, these cars are quick and they're accessible to everyone because they're cheap. Now it's the other way, of course. And now, you've got R34 GTRs cost $500,000. But certainly at that time, I loved the cars, but I also loved they're affordable. And I had a Silvia that had got stuck in a workshop that had burned down during a bushfire. And after my insurance payout and after paying premiums, I didn't have enough money to get a car locally. And so I imported my first car from Japan, which was a 180SX. And when it arrived, I went, oh, now I get it. Just hearing that turbo spool and feeling that performance and realizing how cheap it was. And I think in a way, that kind of lineage has followed through with Mighty Car Mods, which is why we so often are using little K cars, little 600cc turbocharged cars, because they're still really cheap.
Yeah, the Daihatsu Copen. I actually owned a Daihatsu many years ago, about 20 years ago. I owned a Daihatsu Syrian GDVI, and they were a good. They were good.
Little Daihatsu, they're great.
They're great cars. Absolutely great cars. I owned one for 10 years. I did a couple of track days in that car. I accidentally banged it up once, but on the track. But hey, you gotta push the limits of adhesion and find out what your limits are. But it was great fun to do. I did a couple of, as I said, track days around Oran Park, and I think the fastest I was trying to get under a minute around the South Circuit. I got to 61 seconds. So hey,
that's close.
It's close.
You understand, because certainly, we're doing some interviews last week, and when interviews were asking what kind of cars I liked, Jonathan would usually jump in and go, Blair likes the crap. And that's what was I own it. I do like crap cars. I think they're more exciting than a fancy car. I honestly do.
I do have to touch on the Camry that you recently did with Marty that you turbocharged. So Camrys,
Yes.
we know they're boring as anything, and I mean they're the kind of cars, that they've replaced the Commodore now. You see them everywhere, and they've now got the tissue box on the rear shelf in the car, and I mean they're like flies. They pop up everywhere, and you don't know where. Oh, there's another Camry. There's another Camry. You and Marty picked one up for I think about $3,500 or $4,000 it was. And then you put a turbocharger in it. You bought a turbo kit from the United States for a Toyota Scion, as it's called, and you put it in, and you actually improved the speed of the car and the performance of the car, and you
everything.
Yeah,
We actually bought it's the world's cheapest like turbo kit that we bought online.
yeah.
And the turbo was broken. Like the kit, basically none of the kit worked. We used some of the silicons from it. But I think as well, what was important about that car is we also want to skirt around what all the cool cars are, because normally when a car is equated to cool, it means it's expensive and it means that it's out of reach for a lot of people and a lot of viewers of our show. And so by getting a car like a Camry, they're cheap, they're plentiful, they're everywhere. Most people assume they're boring because they are. And that was certainly Marty's brainchild. And he said, hey, I think we can make a Camry cool. And I'm like, I don't know if we can. But he's like, let's do it. And so he's kind of spearheaded that project. And it made a car that, I think was actually really unique. Some of that car still exists. The car was crushed recently, but
Yes,
some
I
of it
saw
will
that.
live on in the next month or so. You will see exactly why that happened, and you'll see a car of similar excitement or lack of, and it'll all make sense.
I'm looking forward to that because I did catch up on that, and it's it's a very entertaining video. Go and have a look at it if you haven't looked at Mighty Car Mods on YouTube. We'll put links on the show notes. But it's a crazy concept, but it works, and you managed to get I think around 11 seconds down the quarter mile with a turbocharged Camry. I mean, that's just insane. Whereas you almost got 20 seconds the first time around for a naturally aspirated example.
Yeah, you know what? They make a V6 version that's pretty quick.
Yeah.
Like that's actually a quick car. I haven't driven one, but Marty's raving about it. I hope he doesn't buy it. We have no parking spots left. A common question we get, someone said, where's all the cars? I mean, they're kind of, we store them wherever we can at a parent's house or like somewhere, but I'm just, I'm on Facebook Marketplace most days trying to find unique, exciting cars. And I often find ones that are not unique or exciting, and I'm buying them anyway. So,
wow.
yeah.
Well, although you have a common ground about Camrys with That's What I Reckon. You did a collaboration with him last year. We made a barbecue.
You really know your stuff, don't you?
I do.
You are the most. See, this morning I'm holding up to the camera. This. I do interviews every 15 minutes, pages and pages of it, and you are the most well researched of them all, because you know some proper OG stuff.
I do know some. I know some motorsport stuff too. So like I got my brain is like filled with so much information. Sometimes I forget to write it down, so I have to sometimes rely on my faulty memory as time goes on. But yeah, I remember you did the video with That's What I Reckon, the barbecue sauce, and you also tasted some pretty chat stuff, some chat food.
Chat, there he is.
Yes,
basically how that out is he was wearing a Mighty Car Mods t-shirt on his YouTube series.
Yep.
And so we managed to get one of his shirts, and then we wore that on our show, and then everyone's like, you should do a thing, and we did. We both live in Sydney, and we decided to do a challenge where we would cook each other food. But the shit that I cooked him, what I did is I went to the local supermarket and I actually crawled underneath the shelves to find anything that had fallen down behind them. And I bought all of that and cooked it up for him. Right. He's into cool cars as well.
I know he is. He's got a Subaru WRX. He makes no bones about that. He loves to get around. I want to try and get him on at some stage onto this pod. I think that would be a very entertaining chat, because we know that he loves to drop a few clangers here and there. Actually, no, he drops a lot of clangers, so we might have to put a.
I'm chatting with him this afternoon actually, so I'm gonna throw a good word your way.
Thank you, mate. That would be really, really good. I'll have to get in touch with him. But I know he has a profound hatred for Camrys with the tissues on the back shelf of the car. Like he says,
and unfortunately, we didn't get to take him for a ride in ours, or I reckon we would have changed his mind. Enough reason to build another one, I reckon.
Yeah, I think so. Actually, the Camry that raced at Bathurst in the 6 hour this year, it originally raced at the Bathurst 1000 in 98. I was there that year, my first year in the media, and yeah, it turned up again 25 years on, competing at the 6 hour. not with the tissue on the shelf, but the Camrys, they just, as I said, they just turn up everywhere and they're just so reliable. I mean, they're just so boring, but just so reliable. I just don't get it.
I'm just laughing because I think what's funny about this chat is that tomorrow the only English version of Top Gear in production in the world is about to drop on Paramount.
Yes.
We had Ferraris, we had Paganis. I'm racing a Porsche 911 Dakar on a Formula One circuit, but we are here talking about Toyota Camrys. We are here to have the real conversations. And actually, as you will hear in episode 1 of Top Gear when it drops tomorrow, I often use the Toyota Camry as a currency. So when somebody says, wow, this car costs $1 million, I'm like, that's 500 Camrys. And so I use that as a measure of currency. And you will hear that in the first episode. You'll find out important things like how many Camrys can you buy for the same price as a Pagani.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Actually, what about this? How many Camrys would you want to pay for a Ford Sierra RS Cosworth? Because I'm old school. I grew up watching Sierra Cosworths race and BMW M3s, and I'm a big BMW fan. So I love the M3, the E30 Evo. So I love that. How many Camrys do you reckon you'd pay for one of those?
How many Camrys? 2. I'd give you 2 Camrys.
Okay. What about the Sierra?
400.
400? Are you kidding?
I did an interview this morning and on one of these kind of the morning talk shows, and they were saying that there's a $100 million jackpot of some kind. And they said, what would you do if you won it? And I let them know exactly how many Camrys I would buy, which was many, many thousands of them.
Okay, we won't. Let's not spoil it because I got you on for the Dream Garage, so we were going to find out shortly. It depends how many Camrys you're going to buy, so we'll find out about that.
Well, how much room have you got?
I got plenty. I've had a weird and wide variety of cars from people that have told me what their dream garages will be. We'll touch on that shortly.
Nice. One
more thing before we move on and find out a little bit more about your passion for cars. The Subaru Brumby that you did recently for Subaru, it was an abandoned find on a apple farm in Bilpin in the Blue Mountains. I just watched through that before we recorded the interview. What an amazing exercise that was. Nothing silly about it. It was just a wonderful concept, and you did that for Subaru Australia and the Australian Road Safety Foundation. So it was done for a non-for-profit charity, and
right.
It was a great concept to find an abandoned Subaru Brumby, which are still popular to this very day, 30 years after they've stopped building them. And you've made it into, a modernised version with the Forester running gear in the Brumby chassis and everything. And it's fantastic. You guys did an absolutely tremendously good job.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I have to, again, point all of that praise towards Marty, again, because he was... He was instrumental in that build, and in terms of his concepts and spearheading it and managing that whole process. And we had a couple of experts as well that came in from country areas of Australia and also Perth to help with that. So I loved seeing that project unfold as well. But I can't take any of the credit other than removing some things and being the work experience kid, because there was a lot of knowledge in that room and not much of it was coming from me. But they did an amazing job, and it was really nice to be involved with Subaru to work for a non-profit, and that car has been given away now, and I've seen a few spy shots of it. It's been seen out on the streets driving around. I think the new owner is enjoying it.
This is the Motor Dream Podcast.
We know how much you love cars. We know how much you love your JDMs. We know that you've been doing a lot of supercar driving stuff around the world for Top Gear Australia, and I'm really looking forward to watching the first couple of episodes when it drops on Paramount Plus. But I want to know a little bit more deeper about what makes you tick as a car person. So I'm going to start by asking you, what was the first car that you drove? Do you remember what age you were when you first drove a car?
The very first time driving a car was actually, I think you're going to like this, a VL Commodore. That's the first car that I actually drove, because my mum had a VL Commodore station wagon, and that's what I drove, with my L's on. I also had my old Mini that I had when I was young, so I drove around in that.
Yeah.
By the time I got my P's, I was driving around in an old Mini. That's what drove. I wasn't that good working on cars back then though, and it was always breaking. Like it was just yeah, it was just it never worked reliably. And I think that's why as I kind of got older and got a little bit more time and a bit more experience with cars and met more people, I built the JDM Mini that I drive now because, Japan still has made the classic shaped Minis available since the made all the way up to the early 2000s.
That's right.
So I've got a 1998 Mini Cooper, which is powered by a B16B, which is a 1.6 litre from the Civic Type R.
Oh, nice.
And so it's modern, it's fast, it's got VTEC, it revs to 9,000 RPM. It's got a Haltech running it. It's done beautifully. And so that's kind of harking back to the car that I wish I had when I was young, but then I managed to build it.
That is really cool. You know what I wanted to do when I was 15? I wanted to buy a Mini, get Suzuki GDI running gear, so Swift GDI running gear, and shoehorn that into a Mini. Yeah, make it a modern interpretation of the Mini. You beat me to that.
That's exactly what this is. And it is fairly common kind of doing VTEC Minis. There are kits and stuff available.
Yeah.
And I worked with a friend of mine, Miles, who has a shop called AM Auto up in Noosaville, I think it is. And his dad was a Mini mechanic. And so he was very, very clever and he helped me with that process. I'd like to do another one. I'd like to do an electric one, except currently it's too expensive.
I was going to ask, what do you make of that? What do you make of those ones that are currently converting?
I'm all for it. I'm not a purist at all. Some people are like, you're not allowed to do that. It takes away the spirit of it. The spirit is what you give the car. The car should not be giving you the spirit. That is the wrong way around.
Yeah.
It's like you should be saying, what is it that excites me? What is it that gets me really interested in driving cars? And so I would like to do it. And I know that BMW make a kit that can retrofit to the car. It keeps everything standard, subframe out, engine out. This whole thing goes in. It's a couple of days conversion, but they still cost, I think it's like $70,000. Like it's very, very expensive. So until the price comes down of those kits, I don't think electric stuff's going to take off. And I don't want to go on a big rant about that now, but we did manage to drive some electric cars in this season of Top Gear. Of course, people are like, they're going to do electric cars. You have to. It's 2024 and electricity is coming. The voltage cars are coming. And we did do part of an episode was with electric cars.
All right, we've discovered the first car you've driven and the first car that you own. And it's great that you owned a Mini. My dad actually owned a Mini when he was, when I was probably younger, like when I was only a toddler. So we had Minis in the early stages of my life. And then he had a Layla Marina, which is nice. Which is like quintessentially British, but we'll leave that for another day. Do you remember the first road trip that you went on when you were growing up?
Yeah, I do. I had a Holden Camira for a short period of time, unfortunately.
Oh.
That was the car I had there. Just stop it. Don't judge me. No, do. Actually, I'll suffer your judgment. No, that was between my
That's
Mini,
all right.
my Nissan Silvia. I had a Holden Camira. It was canary yellow, had a cassette deck. Used to drive around listening to heavy metal, and I did a road trip down to Melbourne, but I don't believe I actually made it because that car was just an utter piece of shit. I want to buy another one, and I probably shouldn't have said that because any weird bids that actually own one that were planning on selling them are probably listing them on Marketplace right now. I did see an ad for a Holden Camira last week. It was under $2,000, and the person who had listed it had said, one day this will be a classic. No.
It ain't.
No, it's not going to be a classic. And any car that is actually going to be a classic doesn't cost $1,000. So
can I say something? I've got a friend of mine I went to school with. He does listen to this podcast, and he knows exactly what I'm going to say. He owned a Holden Camira back in the mid to late 90s. He actually done one up in the style of an HSV Club Sport.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Like, it had the HSV body kit and everything. It looked like a HSV, but I mean, it was a piece of shit Holden Camira. Let's face it. I mean, with the Family 2 motor and everything.
And he had a good time, and he wasn't dying of embarrassment, then good on him. But, what's he doing now, this guy? What's he up to these days?
He owns an XR6 Turbo Falcon, and he also owns a couple of Peugeots.
Nice. Okay. Oh, Peugeot.
I actually convinced him to buy a 405 MI16.
Okay.
Back in the
and what does he do for a job now, though? Like, what's he doing in his life?
He works for government. So he works for government these days, and he also works for his second job's doing customer service for Otis. I shouldn't mention actually he works for an elevator company. Let's put it that way.
Okay. So I mean, here's what I'm getting at, because your friend obviously a gentleman and a scholar.
Yes.
He and I both started at some point of our automotive careers driving Holden Chimera's. He's now got an XR6 Turbo, a couple of Peugeots, and has a stable job earning good money. And I became the host of Top Gear. So I guess what I'm saying is, Holden Chimera, great place to start.
That's very true. Actually, my first car was a Ford Telstar.
Oh, was it?
Yes, it was. It is a piece of shit. I know. It broke down on me many times. I had to replace the alternator like 3 times. Every time I replaced it, it would not work properly. And then in the end, I blew the engine up. So there you go.
Yeah, great. Well, that car did exactly what it was meant to do, and that is not work.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Do you remember the first time you changed a tyre?
I don't remember the first time I changed a tyre, but I do remember one of the first times I changed an oil filter. And can I give you this story instead?
I do.
When I traded a tyre story for an oil filter story. So
Please do.
when I got my 180SX, it was a 1994 model. And so at that point, they were changing. There was an SR20, which was a red top engine. They'd gone from the CA 1.8 litres before that. And then from 94 onwards, they had a black top engine. They were slightly different. And I went and got the oil filter. That was the right one, apparently, for my car. I put it on there, and I remember driving into the city of Sydney, and my oil light came on, and I looked out the back of my car, and I just left an oil slick right through George Street, pretty much the main street of Sydney. And it turns out that on my particular year, which was a changeover year, it wasn't using the red top oil filter, even though the engine code was the same. It was using one which was from an S14. All nerdy stuff. Only Nissan people will care about this. But the point was, is I was like, yes, I'm going to learn how to do stuff myself. It didn't go well. My car broke down and left on a tow truck.
Oh, no. Oh, along George Street, and I'm from Sydney as well, so I know exactly. This is long before the days that the trams are now going down George Street. You can actually drive.
Well, it was Elizabeth Street technically that kind of goes down there, but you know, we're talking the CBD.
Oh, isn't that the worst place to break down, in the heart of the CBD, and you leave an oil slick right down Elizabeth Street? That is bad.
Oh, it is, and like especially when you're in like a lowered car with a big Canon exhaust and it's all black. Like everyone just assumes you're a dickhead.
Enough said. Enough said. You mentioned before you listen to a little bit of heavy metal. Well, is that the kind of music you like to listen to when you go on a road trip, or what's your music taste like?
Yeah, I mean, I like listening to kind of classic metal and like Pantera, Metallica, you know, stuff like that. But when I was younger, if you caught me rolling around in my Mini or Chimera, I'd be listening to Cannibal Corpse, Deicide, Burzum, like really heavy black metal stuff.
Yeah.
Which is funny because I don't make much music like that, but it's what I like to listen to. I mean, that's what I was listening to on my way here today, like coming into Channel 10. That's what I like to listen to. What do you listen to when you're cruising?
Classic rock, bit of techno, bit of R&B and rap. But my wife listens to a lot of R&B and rap and Savage Garden, and I'm like, I can't do Savage Garden.
Your wife listens to Savage Garden?
Because my wife listens to it. My wife listens to it. If I'm in the car with her, I am going to throw under the bus. If I listen to Savage Garden, I have no choice but to listen to it. So, but she
I've never heard someone admit that they listened to Savage Garden before. So I'm getting a few looks and laughs around the office here.
I listen to Queen, though. I do listen to Queen. I'm a massive Queen fan. So
no, you can't save yourself now.
I can save myself.
You can't say, I drive a Hyundai Excel. Oh, but I've got an M3 as well. It's already out there now. Savage Garden. All right. Well, it's been a nice chat. Thank you. Can I?
You can't do that.
Let's move on to the next question.
Next question. Let's save ourselves. Did you get your license first go?
Second go. Everyone gets it second go.
Same.
No one gets it their first go. I reckon they say, look, this chump's coming in to do his L's. Make sure he fails and bring him back the next time. That's just how it works.
That's fair. What about eating in cars? Yes or no?
No way. Eating in cars is foul. I keep a vacuum next to my car in the garage.
Yeah.
And when I get home, if there's any mess in there, I will clean it up. We got a work ute and stuff like that. That can stay dirty. And, you know, some of the guys we work with use that. It's always full of Red Bull cans and Monster Energy. And, like, they can do whatever they want. But, like, my own personal cars, like Mini, 240Z, any of the hot hatches, no eating, no way. What about you?
I might be guilty of having a coffee in the car, but that's probably as far.
Yeah, coffee's okay. Most cars that we buy off Facebook Marketplace, when you remove the seats, there's a whole bag of chips under there, like Macca's chips.
Oh no, we don't.
That's
I don't go that far. That's just no. If you eat in the car, take what you've done and throw it away. That's a sensible thing.
Coffee is reasonable. And during this series of Top Gear Australia, we made a drive-through coffee shop. We made Sydney's best. And so that episode will also be one of the first to drop. The reason we went to Colombia was to try and get coffee beans, to try and make a drive-through cafe. We opened up a performance drive-through cafe in Sydney, and all sorts of people with supercars and stuff. Well, actually, you watch it and find out. But
yes.
Yeah, I don't drink coffee, but I tried my first coffee ever in the jungles of Colombia. You can see how that goes down.
But hang on, if you don't drink coffee, you drink Red Bull and Monster Energy. There's caffeine in that.
I don't drink those. No,
really?
Just some stuff we work with. None of that stuff for me. Not even a tea. It's just nope, no caffeine. Caffeine's not good for me.
Okay, I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it at that. All right. What's the best car you've owned and the worst car you've owned? I'll kill two birds with one stone.
Worst car I've ever owned is called a Holden Chimera.
Well, we know about that.
And you know what? I think the best car often changes, because I remember after a while kind of going, I had so many friends that were into Subarus. I go, you know what? I'm going to try it. And I got a Subaru Forester XT Turbo, did a big turbo conversion, tune, all those kinds of things. And at that point in time, I thought it was the best, because it's like an SUV. There's lots of room. You can get around in it, go on adventures and things. But then after a while, you go, oh, it's a bit boring. And so I'm reticent to give a favorite car, because it really does change day to day. Like sometimes I've never really bit the BMW kind of bug, or it hasn't bit me. I did buy an F80 M3 once, and I owned it for 20 minutes. And I took it back to the dealership and I said, please, can I return it? And they said, the person who does our accounts is not in today, so luckily we haven't banked the check, and they just ripped it up. But I now, so that was a couple of years ago, but now I actually really want one. So, but at that point in time, it wasn't for me.
That's very interesting that you decided to change your mind on an F80 M3. Like, what was it at the time you didn't like about it?
Do you know, I don't know if I can say it. Oh, actually, I can say it. I went to a racetrack, and on the racetrack, I had a drive of it. And I just wanted to check its acceleration, and just in kind of normal mode, put the foot down, a little bit of a spirited drive, and it just left big black marks down the road in the dry. And I was like, oh, I get it. This is fun. But I was looking at a car that I could daily in all sorts of weather. I could carry stuff around with, take a mountain bike in the back and stuff. And I was just like, what am I thinking? It's like, this car doesn't do any of the things that I need it to do, other than look really cool and do big burnouts.
Yeah.
And so I took it back, and went straight to the Audi dealership and bought an RS3.
Not bad. RSCs are pretty good. They're actually pretty nice. I would I'd do the James May route. If I wasn't to get an M3, I get an Audi RS4. Obviously, they don't make RS4s anymore, but my God, the
RS4 is the ultimate. I owned an S4 for a little bit. Great car.
Yeah.
Just awesome. What, they don't make an RS4 anymore?
I'm not sure, but the 4.2 V8 version of the RS4.
Not that version.
No.
I think they just do the twin turbo version now. But I think an RS4, if you've got the money, is the ultimate of everything. You've got proper performance, proper utility. You can take it to a track. It's got street cred. It's not too big, because I drove an RS6 for a little while making Top Gear. It was supplied as a car that that we could drive around in. I drifted the absolute shit out of it, and that was pretty scary, but excellent. I don't know if you've ever drifted a high power all-wheel drive car, but you've fully got to commit with your foot to the floor, because if you come off with power, the front wheels grip and it just sends you off. So that was a fun part of the training we did. We did lots of driver training as part of the show, so they would kind of go do performance driving in a front-wheel drive car, in a Hyundai, in a rear-wheel drive, a Mustang, an all-wheel drive car. And I reckon we did probably about a week's worth of driver training before we even started shooting anything with Luke King. I don't know if you know him.
I do. Luke was a guest, my very first guest on my podcast. So there you go.
Okay. And we had Luffy as well.
Warren Luff, yes.
And so, it was actually really amazing to kind of work with those guys. And I was like, if nothing else, this is cool. Learning some good skills. And those boys can wheel. I tell you what, they can drive properly.
What's Luke like? Because I know Luke quite well. I've known him for many years, and he's obviously a very experienced race driver in his own right. But as a driving instructor, what's he like?
He is the most lovely, calm, polite guy that you could ever meet. It's kind of, he's got a touch of the race car drivers in terms of the confidence. And I think you need that because otherwise you're not going to be very good at doing what your job is.
Yeah.
But certainly with us, he had to sit in the passenger seat while we were doing some fairly hectic stuff. And he's always just cool and calm. And then sometimes he'd get, we'd feel like we were doing pretty well. And then he'd get behind the wheel and he'd go, okay, that's what a professional does. Like that is the difference. And certainly I enjoyed very much working with him and Luffy. And I think we're lucky to have him on the show. We've had Luke on Mighty Car Mods a couple of times. And if some of your viewers just want to have a quick look or listen, we did one which was front wheel drive versus all wheel drive versus rear wheel drive.
Yeah.
It's not an actual battle. It's just Luke in 3 different styles of cars, taking us around a racetrack and talking about the different ways you can drive for performance based on what wheels are driving the car. It's actually a really interesting video. So you can find that by looking for Mighty Car Mods on YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as I said, we'll put a link of that in the show notes. One final question before we move on to the Dream Garage. Pet peeves, like stickers on cars, spoilers and stereos and that. Now, look, I have a fair idea that you love those kind of things. You obviously do stickers for Mighty Car Mods. Are they a thing that you do on your car? Do you put stickers on your car or do you put spoilers? Or
sometimes, but it's like I'm not into like one sticker. I'm into none or many, So it's kind of, unless it's just a little chopped fingers. And I love seeing those around because all around the world, it's really nice to be driving along and see the little Mighty Car Mods chopped finger stickers on the back of cars.
Yeah.
And so most of my cars have got that on the rear corner. And I think that's just a nice subtle one. We make them in a couple of different colors. But I don't really have that many pet peeves. And the reason that I don't have pet peeves is because everybody's on different stages along their journey. And certainly the way Mighty Car Mods started, I mean, one of our videos, we were showing people how to get a texture and color in paint on your car so it didn't look as bad. So I'm in no position to judge what people should or shouldn't do with their car. In the early days of Mighty Car Mods, we got a Mark III Golf. We stripped all the paint off it, covered 3 of the panels in beer, and then weed on the 4th panel to see if the rust would look different. I am in no position to judge anyone. Unless you've stripped the paint off your car and weed on it to see what it looked like and then taken your Volkswagen to a Honda mix, credibility through the floor. So no pet.
Well, hang on. You've done the lens cleaner for your headlights with urine and also
toothpaste. That works well. It does. Yep. And avocado skin, but avocados are too expensive now because all the hipsters are eating them, and they're too expensive. So we're back to using polish again.
Oh boy, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of rabbit holes we could go down, but I think we'll leave that.
There's a lot to unpack, but I'm also trying to be professional.
I figured that. But what is professional? No, I'm kidding. All right.
I have no idea.
No, exactly. All right. This is why we got you on the podcast, Moog. You wake up one morning and you get a text and it says, check your bank balance. And you think, oh, come on, what's this all about? This is a scam or something like that. Speaking of which, you did a video about scams recently in your YouTube shorts. That's another topic for another day. But this is all fun and humor. You then check your bank balance and you find out that your bank balance has gone to stratospheric levels. You're an instant billionaire. And you don't know why or how you got the money, but you're stunned. You then get an email from this mystery benefactor, and it tells you that you can buy any car, bike or machine that you like, but you're only allowed 3 in your dream garage. So with that in mind, what is the first car, bike or machine that you like to have in your dream garage? Now, if it's all Camrys, then God help you.
You've worked me out already. Spot 1, Turbo Camry. Spot 2, V6 Camry. Spot 3, no. You know what? Okay, I'm going to say thank you to my benefactor. I only need $2,000. Car number 1 in there is going to be a B16 powered Mini because that is just the ultimate, and I already own one.
Exactly.
Car number 2 is definitely going to be an RB powered 240Z. As created on Mighty Car Mods, which I already own and built with my mates. And spot number 3, there's nothing in there. But when I get to spot number 3, there's just a phone sitting there. And there's only one app on the phone. And as I pick it up and look at it, it's a search for used cars on car sales or Facebook Marketplace. And it's done a search for only turbocharged cars under $2,000. and I search for the cheapest one and I click the button. I go and buy that and I make a video series about it. That is my dream garage.
Oh, now I like that. I like the third choice because it is an open-ended book. And I'm sure you're going to do a video on Mighty Car Mods about that. And I'm sure at some stage I would like to get you back on to talk about that because that would be
what it was. I'll do it. Absolutely. I'll
done.
come back.
But I want to go back just because obviously you talked about the Mini, which you already have done and you own. You're very proud of that. The RB powered 240Z. Where did the inspiration come from? What was the idea?
This was, again, I wish I had a romantic story to tell you about, my grandparents used to own one. What actually happened is I was on the Japan auction site and I was looking for an R34 GTR, Bayside Blue, V-Spec 2, all the stuff that everybody's looking for. Right. And I was bidding on one. And once it got over $80,000, which was double what I wanted to spend, I was like, I'm out. Now, you know as well as I know that these cars now are worth between $250,000 or $500,000. But I went, what else can I get that is kind of cool, that is in a similar world that I can also find in Japan? And sure enough, when I was traveling to Japan, I found this 240Z or an S30 with an L20 engine, a 2-litre. It was $40,000. And I was like, that is the car for me. But at that time, the Australian government started enacting this kind of asbestos law, which meant that any items with asbestos couldn't come into Australia, which could be gaskets, could be brakes. And so I could get the car in, but I couldn't get the engine in. And so I thought this is a perfect way to blend the two worlds. I couldn't get the R34, but I can get an RB engine. And I've got my 240Z. I can put them together. And along with Marty and along with Alan from Turbo Yoda from Skid Factory and a bunch of other friends in the Haltech crew and Benny from Benny's Custom Works, together I could make this car, which kind of gives me the heart and soul of the R34 with the same engine but a classic body. And that is it's a beautiful car. Just it makes 330 kilowatts at the rear wheels. It weighs less than a ton. One single big turbo, big brake kit. Like that car will hang around forever. I'll own that for all time.
If anyone offered you money to buy the Honda Power Mini or that, would you sell it? Would you?
No, I don't need to. The only reason that Marty and I would be interested in selling our dream cars is for the express and singular purpose of if that helps fund another adventure or another build. That's it. I don't need to sell the car and then go, cool, well, I've got some money in the bank. I would do it because I want to do something else. I can't afford to do that thing. And if I sell that car, it can open the door again, because I also don't want a bunch of cars just sitting around in a garage for years and years at a time. I want them to be driven. I want them to be used. And in a way, we do just become custodians of these cars. And eventually, if I wasn't using them or they weren't being enjoyed, they should be given to someone else anyway. And that's not even a monetary thing. They should be out there being enjoyed by people.
That's a good answer. That's a really good answer to end this interview. And I'm really glad that you've come on the podcast. It was very last minute, but I'm so glad you've come on. But I love your dream garage. 2 that are confirmed, 2 that you already own, which I absolutely love. The RB-powered 240Z, the Honda-powered Mini, and whatever turbocharged car from around $2,000 that you can find on Facebook Marketplace, which I'm sure you'll do in due course on Mighty Car Mods. That's a really cool.
I'll be doing that every week for probably the next 10 years. Thank you so much, though, for having me on the show, and thank you for being so well researched and read about kind of what we're doing. I'm very, very excited and humbled to be asked to be on Top Gear Australia. I'm not sure when this airs, but it starts on May 17th on Paramount Plus. It's getting a release in Australia, also, I believe, South America, across Europe, Canada, I believe. I think it'll be going out to other countries after that. So just keep an eye on the Paramount socials or whatever, or I'll announce them on my socials. You can follow Mighty Car Mods, Blair Joscelyne, that's me on Instagram. And a big shout out to all of your listeners as well, because I'm going to go and check it out. And in fact, I'm going to go straight from here and have a listen to your Luke King interview. So you've got a new follower. Here I am.
Mate, thank you so much. And great plugs. And of course, as you said, Top Gear Australia released on May 17 or May 18 on Paramount.
May 17.
May 17 on Paramount Plus. Really looking forward to it. All the best. Congratulations and good luck with the journey. I really can't wait to see what happens with what you, Jonathan and Beau do. I'm really excited by it.
I reckon you and I should calendar in to meet up again in about 6 months and
Sounds
see what's going on in your world, or see what's going on in mine. Or if you're up in Sydney, maybe we'll get you on the Unicorn Circuit, which is our little weekly car news show, and we'll do an interview with you and find out some answers about your history with cars as well.
Absolutely. Keen to do that. Thank you so much for coming on.
All right. Thanks, mate. Bye.
Cheers. Well, despite the fact that he had an infinite budget, Moog just had to stay true to his mighty car mods roots and buy something cheap to modify and do up to his own interpretation. And you know what? That's not a bad thing, because it doesn't matter if your dream car is an exotic or a garage project. If you have your heart set on something, there's nothing stopping you from achieving it. I also liked how he left the third car in his dream garage as something that he would randomly find on Facebook Marketplace. Preferably a turbocharged car for around $2,000. The mind just wanders what you choose because you just never know what you might find. I'm sure we'll find out one day in the future from Moog what that random car might be. It was such a great chat with Blair, and I wish him all the very best, along with Jonathan and Beau in the new series of Top Gear Australia. You can watch the first few episodes, which are available every Friday night on Paramount+. My thanks to Blair for his generosity and his time and his busy schedule to chat with me at such short notice. A massive thank you also to Haley O'Donnell and Kate Doak from Network 10 for facilitating the interview. Make sure you follow Mighty Car Mods by subscribing to their YouTube channel as well as following them on all their socials. We've put up links on the show notes, which are available on the show page of the Motor Dream podcast website. The website itself is themotordream.com.au, and it's where you can listen to all episodes and find show notes and information on the show itself and the guests that appear. Make sure you also follow us on social media with the handle The Motor Dream, which is also the hashtag. Don't forget to like and subscribe on whatever podcast platform you listen to, and make sure you leave a review, because that's how we keep improving the show and it helps attract new listeners to this very podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Motor Dream podcast, and until next time, remember, as always, to please drive safely out on the roads. I'm Conor McNally. See you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Motor Dream podcast. This series is proudly produced by Beast Productions.